Please follow along as I read A Land of Opportunity. Lars and Karen Anderson looked out over the field. The rich dark brown soil of Wisconsin reminded them of the best farmland back in Sweden. Lars knelt down and scooped up some dirt in his hand. And Karen thought, Lars can read the soil the way some people can read books. Somehow he knows if it is good or bad for growing crops. Now Lars stood up. This is fine land, he told his wife. She could hear the excitement in his voice. Here we will grow wheat and corn. Over there, he said, pointing, we can raise dairy cows for milk and butter. Karen walked a few feet away and said, over here we can build a house and raise a family. Yes, Lars agreed. That's the most important thing of all. The Andersons, like many other immigrants who settled in the American Midwest, came from Northern Europe. This means they immigrated from countries like Germany, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and other nearby European nations, and then moved to the United States. These immigrants brought with them their best knowledge of farming and a strong sense of working together as families and as neighbors. Immigrants like the Andersons came to the United States because they could not own land in Europe. In Europe, kings and princes kept tight control over who was allowed to buy and own land. People who were not friends of the king, or of the rich noblemen or noblewomen whose family had owned land for many years, had trouble buying farmland. Without owning farmland, it was hard for many people in northern Europe to make a living. Friends of the Andersons who had already settled in Wisconsin and nearby Minnesota had written letters back home to Sweden saying, join us in America. Things are different here in the United States. Here you don't have to be king's friends to buy and own land. You just have to be willing to work very hard. During the American Civil War in 1862, the American government under President Lincoln gave huge amounts of government controlled land back to homesteaders. A homestead is land someone settles on to live and farm. The government made it easy for farmers to own as much as 160 acres of land, which was more than enough for a successful farm. A homesteader had to build a house on the land and farm the land at least for 5 years. At the end of that time, for a fee of $18, the person or family would legally own the land. Many different people could become homesteaders. For example, unmarried men or women could become homesteaders. People coming to America, such as immigrants, could become homesteaders. The United States gave all sorts of people a chance to own land and make a new life. Millions of people from across the United States and immigrants from other nations came to the Midwest to lend their farming skills and work hard to build up the United States. With the hope of owning land and making a better life for themselves and their children, Karen and Lars sold nearly everything they owned in Sweden, bought tickets to America, crossed the sea on a ship, and ended up among the low, gently rolling hills of Wisconsin. Now that they made it to Wisconsin, they had to decide what to do with their land. Lars said to Karen, we will leave that patch of forest for now and start with the land that is already cleared. We will get a mule and a plow to loosen the soil and get the land ready to plant. To afford this, we will have to borrow some money and add that money to the money we still have left from Sweden. And we will build a house, Karen said. It doesn't have to be a big one. We can add on to it later when we're more settled and earn more money. And that's what they did. All across the Midwest of the United States, other immigrant farmers were doing the same things, working hard and starting a new life. Working long, hard hours, immigrants and other homesteaders turned the American Midwest into some of the finest farmland on earth, pitching in to help one another through hard times and sharing the joy of another's successes in this new land. With the help of their neighbors, the Andersons built a house partly shaded by the trees they had decided to leave standing. They built a barn and painted it red. They grew wheat and corn to sell and paid the money they owed. They watched over every dollar they earned and every penny they spent. In time, both the little house and their family grew bigger. They now had a boy, Stefan, and two girls, Ingrid and Margaret. One day, 5 years after they arrived in the Midwest in the United States, they claimed their land. The Andersons were ready to pay their $18 so that their land, along with their house, barn, and farmland, would be theirs, officially approved by those in charge. That morning the whole family took turns bathing in the large metal tub in the kitchen, into which they poured warm water heated by the stove. Because it was such a special day, they dressed in their best clothes, which they usually save for church. Karen even dressed up little Margareta in her best outfit. Then Lars said, "It's time. Everyone get into the wagon." With a cry of "Get up!" the two mules he had hitched to the front of the wagon. Lars shook the reins, and they started down the 5 miles of dirt road to the town. And they passed each neighboring farm. The neighbors waved and called out, "Congratulations, Karen! We're proud of you, Lars." Karen and Lars waved back and smiled. They were grateful for the support of their neighbors. At last the Andersons reached town. Lars stopped the wagon in front of the government building and helped Karen and the children from the wagon. They parked inside and up to the counter. Proudly, Lars told the clerk, "Good morning, Mr. Elgard. We have come to claim our land." Less than 5 minutes later, Mr. Elgard smiled and held out his hand to shake. "Congratulations, Lars," he said. "Congratulations, Karen." And then he turned to the two oldest children, Stefan and Ingrid, and said, "And congratulations to you too. Thanks to your mother and father, one day you will own the land too." And Lars and Karen Anderson, farmers now and now official landowners, proudly walked out the door and took their family home.